Valorant is an insanely complex game with intricacy around every corner. Players will spend thousands of hours striving to become the best of the best and still fall short. So today, I put together some of the most common mistakes you're probably making right now. I'm Zapper, the Immortal 3 Yapper, and here are 14 mistakes that 99% of players are still making in 2024. Number 1, dying with utility out. Somehow, this mistake is super common still. The second you pull out your shock dart, the enemy Reyna just peeks out of the smoke at the perfect time, one taps your ass, and dismisses out. If there's any chance you're going to be peeked, you need to have your gun out. Pulling out your utility in the open is super dangerous, and it only really works if your team is controlling the space for you or if you have a timing to do so. Number 2, pushing into spawn after planting the spike. Maybe it's just my team's an Immortal, but I swear the second the spike goes down, the game instantly becomes a race to see who can die the fastest. After getting the spike down, pushing up further is detrimental unless you're seriously down in numbers. Instead, it's better to fall back and set up for post plant. Hide and wait for the bomb tap, maybe throw out some utility, anything that can really stall out the spike timer. Number 3, baiting your allies. This one is a very big deal for a lot of you guys. I know most of you want to maximize your KDs and all that, but it's really important that you don't bait your teammates. If you know your team's running out and fighting the enemy, it's actually best to peek out and try to get the trade kill or get the kill before your teammate dies. This is extremely important because it maximizes your odds of getting a kill since you're fighting with your ally. It's harder to shoot at 2 enemies instead of 1. And better yet, if you manage to kill them before your teammate dies, now you have number advantage. Number 4, flashing your team. This is one that most of you guys know, like you shouldn't really be flashing your team, but it happens anyways. Whether it's disregard to where your team's at, or maybe you're just flashing because you're prone to it and you have a habit of flashing out sight every time you're going out. In order to fix this issue, basically just pay attention to where your team's at and where you're flashing. If your team's in the zone where your flash is going to hit, maybe save your flash for later until your team could benefit from using it. If you accidentally flash your team, you can often get your team killed, and if your entry frag is dying to your flashes, it's going to instantly throw the round. Number 5, peeking into 5 enemies. Obviously, you don't want to peek into 5 enemies. There's no way you're going to peek into 5 and get out alive. So really, what the best thing is to do here is to isolate your gunfights. You need to recognize where the enemy's at and peek accordingly. Make sure you're only peeking 1 enemy at a time, and if you're doing so, you're going to find that you come out alive way more frequently, and it allows you to win more rounds more consistently. Number 6, peeking out too slowly. So this one is super common as well. A lot of players will peek with W and A or W and D at the same time, and this essentially cuts your movement speed in half. If you're moving 2 directions at the same time, you're basically moving diagonally, but if you're peeking diagonally to an enemy who is holding you, who's ready for your peek, you're going to be moving half as fast, and it's going to basically guarantee that you're going to die. So the easy way to counter this is just to peek with only your A key or only your D key. This allows you to peek with the maximum movement speed possible and guarantees your chances of staying alive the longest, which helps you win more of your gunfights. You're able to do this without making noise as well. You just want to make sure you don't step too far. If you go too far, you will start making noise, and this can often get you killed if you do make noise, just because, you know, if you make too much noise, the enemy's going to know where you're at, they're going to know what you're doing, and it's going to be easier for them to punish you and get a kill off of you. Number 7, head height crosshair placement. This is one that's super confusing and tricky to a lot of players. The reason I'm bringing it up here is because everybody knows that you should have your crosshair at head height, but the problem is a lot of players don't account for how elevation and distance away from angles can play into how your crosshair placement is affected. So if an enemy is a little bit lower than you in terms of elevation and they're super far away, you're going to have to aim a lot lower to be on their head. Where if they're super close to the angle and they're also lower on elevation, their head height's going to be a lot higher up. So in order to hold proper crosshair placement, you have to adjust based off of how far or close the enemy is to the angle. You should be taking this into account every time you take a gunfight because The difference between having your crosshair at head height versus not at head height will make a big difference in each of your gunfights that you take. Even if your crosshair is just a little bit off, it can make the gunfight a lot harder, because only having to adjust on the horizontal axis is a lot easier than having to adjust on the horizontal axis and the x-axis. It adds a lot of variables into the predicament of aiming, which is already hard and complex. And if you don't take into account the difficulty of having the extra element of the vertical crosshair placement, then it's going to make you struggle a lot more in your gunfights than you want to be struggling. Number 8, holding quote-unquote off angles. So a lot of people hold off angles. They think they're playing off angles, but they're really playing angles that are often cleared. The issue here is if you're playing angles that are often cleared, you're going to die because of peeker's advantage, which all of you guys know exists. The way to counter this is to actually play real off angles. Instead of just playing angles that people tell you are good, you should be holding from angles that are unexpected or that you know for a fact the enemy's not going to clear. Playing in a weird position that is close to a common angle is going to be much more effective than playing an angle that is predicted that is far from a common angle. If they're clearing you at all, you're going to be at a disadvantage, so you should be taking the element of surprise to your advantage. The only way to get the element of surprise is by playing angles that the enemy legitimately does not expect you to play in. I'll have some examples on screen for you guys. Take this a little bit for granted because some of them might differ from elo to elo. The real goal here is to get a feel for what angles are actually not cleared. A good way to reason this is by thinking about what angles you clear in your games. Number 9, peeking too close to the wall. So if you peek too close to the wall, the problem here is that the enemy is definitely going to have angle advantage over you. So if you peek too close to the wall, the enemy is going to see you first. Another thing to note here is that if you're close to the wall, you will be moving faster on the enemy's screen. And so if the enemy's not expecting you, you should be peeking out wider if you are close to the wall. The main advantage of peeking close to the wall is that if you get out wide enough, you will disrupt the enemy's crosshair placement by utilizing the extra movement speed that you have. If you're close peeking while you're too close to the wall though, you're going to be peeking out slow, you're going to give the enemy's angle advantage, and you're basically just going to die before you can even react to the fight. Number 10, overextending. This is an extremely common problem that I see in every elo. A lot of players will be planting the bomb and then push into the enemy spawn like it's no one's business. This is a big problem because if you overextend, push into the enemy spawn, you're giving the enemy a chance to pick you off. This can give the enemy's numbers advantage back. They can give them a ton of advantages to get back into the round and potentially win a round that is almost guaranteed. I remember seeing a Dopai video. He explained the statistics. After you have the spike down, you have over a 70% chance of winning the round most of the time. So if you're overextending, you are instantly decreasing these odds. After you get the spike down, you have an immediate advantage. And with this, you should be falling back, playing post plant, and maximizing the chances of winning the round. This means playing off bomb taps, hiding in ratty corners and peeking off contact, just doing anything you can to maximize your chances of running down the clock and winning the round. Number 11, taking bad gunfights. This is a big deal and a lot of people don't understand what this even means. Some players will aim train a little bit and then they'll peek every single fight they could possibly take. They hear the enemy running down the corridor and they're like, okay, I know where he's at, let me take this fight. But little do they know, the enemy's ready for this peek and they'll one-tap you the second you peek out. This is really what taking bad gunfights means. The reality of the situation is you want to be unpredictable. And so if you know the enemy's running at you, they probably have an inkling that if someone's close, they're going to peek out because they're making so much noise. So really the best idea is to either hold for the peek if they're making it really obvious when they're going to peek, or maybe just hide around the corner, let them make a little bit of noise, let them think you're not there, and then peek out when they least expect it. Number 12, overthinking. This is a big issue for a lot of players. Many players will think that if they can outsmart their enemy, they can win every round. The issue is that when you're overthinking, your aim lacks a little bit. If you're thinking about every little intricacy in any given round, that's a lot for your brain to process. And if your brain's going through all these little nuances, it's going to have a hard time reacting quickly to gunfights and reacting accurately to gunfights. This can lead to having a major disadvantage anytime you see an enemy, and often overthinkers will whiff more than anybody else. Even if they know exactly what's happening in a round, the second the enemy peeks them, they're going to get completely fucked over. An easy way to combat this is recognize if you're ruminating over one specific detail a lot of the time. If this starts happening, try to calm yourself down, be like, hey, it's okay, like I got this. Try to dial in, focus on what's going on, and do your best to really make the most out of every single round you play. Communicate with your team. Think about, it sounds cheesy, but think about anything but thinking. Number 13, overconfidence. This is another huge issue I see among a bunch of different players. The problem is that a lot of people say that confidence is the most important thing in Valorant. And because of this, people try hyping themselves up. They try telling themselves they're the best player in the world, even if they're not. And then because of this, they'll peek every angle. They'll take every single gunfight they can possibly take. And they'll end up losing a lot of them, especially the ones where they're at a disadvantage. If you are overconfident, you're not going to be thinking about advantages in the same way as someone who is level-minded. This often results in taking fights that, you don't have the best advantage in. Instead of taking a fight after throwing your flash, you're just dry peeking the angle when there's 3 people holding you, and most of the time you're not going to win that fight. Real confidence comes from experience. And as you know what works and what doesn't work, you can take advantage of that, make the plays that do work, avoid the plays that don't work, and you will improve over time. But if you're overconfident, you will continue making bad plays. Even if it's the same play that hasn't worked in the past, you'll continue doing it over and over and over until you inevitably lose all of the ELA you've gained over the past 2 weeks. Number 14, mistiming clicks. This is going to probably be the most helpful tip for most of you guys. It's all about aiming, and it's really a very, very simple concept. The whole point about aiming is to get your crosshair onto the enemy's head and click it as fast as possible. If you can do it faster than the enemy can do it, then you can get a one tap, you can kill them faster than they can kill you, and every kill you get is going to help turn the tide into your favor. The problem a lot of players make is they will rush their shots. Usually, most players can get their crosshair over the enemy's head. Literally guaranteed, I don't care how bad you are, at some point, flailing your mouse around, you can get the crosshair over the enemy's head. The problem is that people will click too early. Instead of clicking at random times or clicking as fast as you can to try to kill the enemy as fast as possible, you should be timing your clicks correctly. If you can time your click the second your crosshair is over the enemy's head, you will guarantee a kill. If you click slightly before that, you'll have gun inaccuracy, you might have movement inaccuracy. There are tons of factors that may limit your ability to get the frag, but if you can time your click properly to where you're clicking the moment your crosshair passes over every single time, aiming is going to be a lot easier. You don't need to have perfect mouse control because you are able to click whenever you notice the crosshair crossing over the enemy's head. This just makes aiming way more consistent, even if you don't have perfect mouse control. So this is a big tip for a lot of you guys. I see a lot of people making this mistake, and if you focus on this, I guarantee you will get a lot better at the game. Anyways, I appreciate all you guys who watch all the way until the end every time. It means a lot to me, but you know what? I appreciate all you guys. Until next time, peace.